my sister sabotaged our older sister's love life with one whispered lie. And now she's wearing the ring that should never have been hers. I never thought I'd be the one holding on to a secret powerful enough to destroy my family. But here I am, stuck between silence and truth, knowing whichever path I choose will leave scars. The first time I met Matt, I didn't think much of him. He wasn't family yet, just a consultant at the firm where both my sisters worked. He had a quiet charm, a way of making people feel seen without speaking too much. I noticed something else too, the way his eyes lingered on Kay, not inappropriately, but softly, almost reverently, like he'd stumbled across a rare book no one else bothered to open. Kay is my older sister. She was 30 back then, reserved, the kind of woman who could walk into a room and vanish into the wallpaper if you weren't paying attention. But if you were paying attention, you'd see her brilliance, her patience, the gentle humor tucked into her words. I always thought of her as porcelain, delicate, yes, but not weak, strong in the way that fragility can be strong when it survives. And for a brief moment, I thought Matt saw her too. But that was before the lie, before Jess poisoned everything. I should probably tell you who I am before I go further. My name is Danielle. I'm 27 years old, the middle child between two forces of nature. For most of my life, I've been the glue in our family, the peacemaker when Kay and Jess clashed, the listener when no one else wanted to hear, the one who smoothed the cracks so things wouldn't break. But glue doesn't last forever, and some cracks were never meant to be sealed. The night it all began was Kay's 30th birthday. Our parents had decorated the living room with soft golden lights. The air smelled like wine and chocolate cake. Kay looked beautiful that night in a pale blue dress, a rare spark in her eyes when Matt walked in. He gave her a small wrapped gift, simple, thoughtful, and I swear for a second I saw hope flicker across her face. But hope is fragile. One breath can blow it out. I didn't hear the words myself. Jess made sure of that. She pulled Matt aside into the hallway, her voice pitched just low enough to keep secrets, but sharp enough to slice through trust. Later, when I asked around, someone told me what she'd said. She told him Kay had a boyfriend. A complete fabrication. A knife disguised as casual gossip. And it worked. Matt's smile faded that night. He left early, avoiding Kay's eyes. Kay tried not to show it, but when the guests were gone, she sat by the window with her hands folded in her lap, staring out into the dark. I'll never forget the look in her eyes, as if she was waiting for something that would never come. Weeks passed. Matt ghosted Kay completely. She confided in me one night over coffee, her voice steady but her eyes broken. "I must have imagined it," she whispered. "I thought, maybe, but I guess I was wrong." I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her it wasn't her imagination, it wasn't her fault. But the words got stuck in my throat, because Jess wasn't just my younger sister, she was family, and betraying her secret felt like betraying blood. But Jess didn't just lie, she thrived on it. She swooped in where Kay had been shut out. Within months, she was bringing Matt to family dinners, laughing at his jokes, holding his hand as though this had always been the way it was supposed to be. Now, years later, they're engaged, smiling, planning a wedding. And only I know the truth, a truth that can unravel everything. Families are complicated. Ours is no exception. Kay, my older sister, has always been the quiet one. Some people mistake that for weakness, but I know better. She isn't fragile glass. She's more like stained glass, reserved, intricate, and only truly seen when the light hits her in the right way. She never needed the spotlight, never craved attention. But because of that, too many people overlooked her. They didn't see the strength in her silence. They didn't see the depth behind her calm. Jess, on the other hand, was the complete opposite. 2 years younger than me, she craved attention like oxygen. If there was a spotlight, she made sure she was standing in the center of it. She was clever, charming, beautiful, and she knew it. Growing up, she always had a way of bending people to her will, usually with a smile. But under that charm was something sharper, something that cut. I've always been somewhere in the middle, not just by age, but by role. My name is Danielle, but my sisters call me Danny. I've been the listener, the peacekeeper, the one who tried to hold everything together when our parents started to drift apart. I told myself that keeping balance was my job, but the truth is, sometimes I felt invisible, overshadowed by Jess's fire and Kay's quiet resilience. It's funny, isn't it? How being invisible makes you notice things others miss. That's why I noticed Matt, not just his presence, but the subtle way his attention shifted. He wasn't swept up in Jess's glow the way most men were. He was drawn almost magnetically to Kay. It wasn't loud or obvious, but it was there. The way he asked her questions, the way his voice softened around her, the way he lingered in conversation even after everyone else moved on. And Kay, she lit up around him in a way I hadn't seen in years. She tried to hide it. She always tried to hide her feelings, but I could see it. The way her hands fidgeted slightly when he was near. The way her laughter carried more warmth when it was directed at him. It was subtle, but it was real. For a brief, fragile moment, I let myself imagine a different future. A future where Kay finally had someone who saw her worth without needing her to scream for attention. Someone who appreciated the quiet strength she carried. But Jess noticed too, and Jess has never been good at letting go of something she wants, even if it wasn't hers to begin with. There's a pattern with her, always has been. Growing up, if I liked a shirt, she'd wear it. If Kay started talking to a friend, Jess would suddenly become that person's best confidant. It wasn't enough for her to shine. She had to dim everyone else's light in the process. It was as though the only way Jess could feel powerful was by standing on top of someone else's loss. And that night, Kay's 30th birthday, Jess saw an opportunity. She didn't just want Matt. She wanted to erase Kay from the possibility of his heart. That's the part that still haunts me. It wasn't just about attraction. It was about cruelty, about claiming victory in a game Kay didn't even know she was playing. When I look back now, I realize that the betrayal didn't start in the hallway with that lie. It started years earlier, with the way Jess always needed to take, to claim, to win. The lie was just the sharpest weapon she'd ever used, and I let it happen. Because sometimes silence isn't peace, sometimes silence is complicity. Kay's 30th birthday should have been a night of celebration. Instead, it became the night everything shifted. Our parents had gone all out, balloons, candles, even a homemade banner stretched across the living room wall. The house was filled with warmth, clinking glasses, bursts of laughter, the faint smell of roasted chicken and vanilla frosting. For once, everyone seemed happy, even Kay. She stood near the window in her pale blue dress, her smile small but genuine. And when Matt arrived, carrying a carefully wrapped gift, I saw the way her face lit up, subtle but unmistakable. It was hope. Kay never let herself hope out loud, but I saw it flicker across her eyes like sunlight through clouds. He handed her the box. She unwrapped it slowly, her fingers trembling just a little. Inside was a leather-bound journal, simple yet elegant, the kind of gift that meant I see you. Kay pressed her lips together, fighting the smile that wanted to spill out. For a moment, I thought, maybe this is it. Maybe Kay finally gets the happiness she's always been denied. But then Jess swooped in. She was radiant that night, hair curled, makeup perfect, laughing too loudly, smiling too wide. She floated from guest to guest, always pulling the attention back to herself. But her eyes kept darting to Matt and Kay, watching, calculating, and then she made her move. I didn't hear it at first. Jess leaned close to Matt, touching his arm lightly, guiding him toward the hallway, with the ease of someone who always got her way. I watched them disappear into the dim light, my stomach tightening. Something in her smile told me this wasn't innocent. I edged closer, pretending to refill my drink, straining to hear. Their voices carried just enough for me to catch fragments. Jess laughed, low, conspiratorial. She's not what you think, you know. Kay already has someone. There was a pause. I couldn't see his face, but I could imagine it. The confusion, the disappointment. Jess's voice dropped softer, but sharp as glass. She's been with a guy for a while. Didn't she tell you? Honestly, I didn't want you to waste your time. My chest tightened. My grip on the glass faltered. I wanted to storm into the hallway, drag her back, force her to swallow her words, but I froze, completely paralyzed. Matt didn't argue. He didn't laugh it off. He just went quiet. When they returned to the living room, his whole demeanor had changed. His smile was polite now, distant. When Kay tried to thank him again for the journal, he nodded, but his eyes had lost their warmth. He left early. And Kay? Kay stayed by the window long after everyone else had gone, staring into the night like she was waiting for something to return. Her fingers traced the edge of the journal on her lap. I knew she was replaying every moment, wondering what she had done wrong. She hadn't done anything wrong, but she believed she had. In the weeks that followed, Matt's silence became louder than words. No calls, no texts, no chance encounters at the office. Kate didn't ask me about him directly, but I could feel the heaviness in her. Over coffee one evening, she finally whispered, "I guess I imagined it all. He must have just been kind." Her voice didn't break, but her eyes did. I wanted to tell her, to scream that it wasn't her fault, that Jess had cut her down before she even had a chance to bloom. But I stayed silent, and Jess, she thrived. Within weeks, she was the one showing up at family dinners with Matt. She laughed louder, touched his arm more often, made sure everyone saw their new connection. It was as though she'd rewritten history overnight, as though Kay had never been part of the picture at all. That night, Jess didn't just steal a chance at love from Kay. She planted a lie that grew into a future, and I was the only witness. In the weeks after Kay's birthday, our family's rhythms shifted. At first, it was subtle. Little things you only notice when you're paying close attention. Matt stopped lingering near Kay at work. The texts she thought might come never arrived. His chair at our Sunday dinners sat empty more often than not. Kay never said much about it. That was her way. She carried pain like a secret folded tightly in her pocket. Never shown, never spoken, but always there. I saw it in the way she stirred her coffee longer than usual, her eyes drifting to nothing in particular. I heard it in the way her laughter, once warm, turned faint, brittle, like glass about to crack. One evening, she sat across from me at the kitchen table, the journal he had given her untouched beside her. She smiled softly and said, "I must have been imagining things. He was just being kind. I shouldn't have read into it." Her words were steady, but her eyes betrayed her. There's nothing more painful than watching someone you love convince themselves they were never worthy of something they clearly deserved. Meanwhile, Jess was blossoming. She started mentioning Matt casually at first, how they bumped into each other after work, how he just happened to walk her home. Within a month, he was her +1 to family dinners. Within 2, they were inseparable. The first time I saw them arrive together, my stomach twisted. Jess had her hand looped around his arm, like a trophy she wanted everyone to see. She laughed too loudly at his jokes, leaned in too close, kissed him too deliberately, all while stealing glances at Kay. And Kay, she smiled. She smiled as though it didn't cut her to pieces. She smiled as though her heart wasn't being scraped raw every time Jess touched him. I don't know which broke me more, Jess's cruelty or Kay's grace. By the time a year had passed, Jess and Matt were officially a couple. Family photos shifted. Memories rearranged themselves. What once could have been Kay's quiet love story had been rewritten as Jess's conquest. Then came the announcement. It was a sunny afternoon, ordinary and unremarkable, until Jess burst into the living room, her eyes shining like she'd just won the lottery. She lifted her hand, showing off a sparkling diamond that caught the light and blinded the room. "We're engaged," she cried. Our parents gasped, rushing to hug her. Matt smiled, though there was a tightness in his expression I couldn't quite read. Kay clapped politely, her voice calm, her smile composed. Only I noticed the way her fingers curled into her palm, hidden at her side. I stood there frozen, my applause hollow in my chest, because I knew what no one else did, that this engagement, this future, this supposed fairy tale, was built on a single venomous lie. And I was the only one holding the truth, a truth that now had the power not just to hurt feelings, but to shatter lives. After the engagement announcement, I couldn't sleep. Nights stretched into endless hours where silence pressed against my chest like a weight I couldn't shake off. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Kay's smile at that moment. Small, tight, composed, a smile that masked devastation. I kept asking myself, was I a coward? Every family dinner that followed was torture. Jess sat next to Matt, draped over him like ivy, her laughter slicing through the room. She'd flash her ring at every opportunity, basking in the glow of attention. And Matt, he seemed content enough, but there was something in his eyes sometimes, a flicker of doubt, a hesitation when Jess wasn't looking. I wondered if he ever thought back to Kay, even for a second. Kay was a masterpiece of restraint. She helped Jess plan parts of the wedding, listened patiently as Jess paraded her excitement, and never once let bitterness slip into her voice. But I knew better. I knew the cost of that composure. Late at night, she'd linger in the kitchen, staring at the journal Matt had given her, fingers brushing the spine but never opening it. And me? I carried the secret like a burning coal in my chest. I imagined telling Matt the truth 1,000 different ways. Sometimes I pictured pulling him aside quietly, calmly explaining what really happened that night. Other times I saw myself blurting it out in front of the whole family, watching Jess's smug smile crack under the weight of her own lie. But every scenario ended the same way: chaos, screaming, broken bonds, a family divided beyond repair. I tried to convince myself to stay silent, to let it go. After all, years had passed since the lie was told. Maybe it didn't matter anymore. Maybe Matt really loved Jess now. Maybe the truth would only bring pain. But then I'd look at Kay. One evening, I found her alone in her room, staring at an old photograph of the three of us as children. Her thumb traced the edges of the frame as if she could smooth away the years of hurt. She didn't see me in the doorway, but I heard her whisper to herself, "I don't know why I was never enough." That broke me. It wasn't just about Matt anymore. It was about the way Jess had stolen Kay's chance at happiness and left her questioning her own worth. It was about the injustice of watching someone so kind carry pain she didn't deserve. And it was about me, the middle sister who claimed to be the glue, but who had let silence rot us from the inside out. I started pacing the house at night, rehearsing words in my head, imagining the confrontation. My hands shook just thinking about it, but the more I tried to suppress the urge, the stronger it became. It was like standing on the edge of a cliff, knowing the ground beneath me was crumbling. Either I jumped, or I'd be dragged down anyway. And deep down, I knew. The moment of silence had passed. The truth was coming, one way or another. It happened on an ordinary Sunday dinner. That's what makes it unforgettable, how betrayal and truth can shatter a family in the middle of something so routine. The table was crowded with dishes: roast chicken, mashed potatoes, Jess's favorite red wine. Jess was glowing as usual, her engagement ring flashing every time she lifted her glass. She leaned into Matt, laughing too loudly, feeding him bites of dessert like we were all extras in her performance. Kay sat across the table, quiet as always, smiling politely whenever someone looked her way. Her eyes, though, were distant. I knew she wasn't really with us. She was somewhere else, retreating into herself, as she so often did when the weight became too heavy. And me, my fork hovered over my plate, untouched. My chest was tight, my hands trembled. I'd been carrying this secret for years, but that night, something inside me snapped. Jess leaned in, touching Matt's shoulder, and with a smirk, she said, "Can you believe it? Out of everyone, I'm the one who got him." The words were meant as a joke, but they sliced through me. I saw Kay's head lower slightly, her smile faltering for just a second. That was it, the final straw. Before I knew it, my voice was rising. "Do you even hear yourself, Jess?" The room went silent. Forks clinked down. All eyes turned to me. My heart pounded so hard, I thought it might burst through my ribs, but the words poured out before I could stop them. "You sit here parading this engagement like it's some fairy tale, but we all know how you got here. Do you remember Kay's birthday? Do you remember what you told Matt that night?" Jess froze, her smile stiffening. "What are you talking about?" I leaned forward, my voice shaking but steady enough to cut. "You told him Kay had a boyfriend. You lied, Jess. You destroyed something before it even had the chance to grow, just so you could take it for yourself." Gasps rippled around the table. My mother's hand shot to her mouth. My father leaned back, stunned. Matt stared at me, his face paling, his fork slipping from his hand. Kay didn't move. Her eyes widened, but she stayed frozen, like a porcelain figure suddenly exposed to the light. Jess's voice cracked as she tried to laugh it off. "That's ridiculous. Danny, you're making things up. Why would I ever—" because you couldn't stand the thought of Kay being chosen instead of you. My voice was calm now, eerily calm. You've been doing it since we were kids, Jess. Taking, claiming, winning. But this time it wasn't a shirt or a friend. This time it was her happiness, and you lied to get it. The silence that followed was suffocating. Matt turned to Jess, his jaw tight, his eyes searching hers for denial, for reassurance, for anything. But she said nothing. Her face flushed red, her lips pressed thin, her silence screaming louder than words. And in that silence, the truth settled over the table like ash after a fire. Kay finally spoke, her voice soft but cutting through the stillness. "Is it true?" she asked Jess. Jess didn't answer. She didn't have to. The room fractured. My parents were speechless. Matt pushed his chair back, running a hand through his hair, his breathing uneven. Kay sat still, tears brimming in her eyes but refusing to fall. And me? I sat there shaking, my pulse ringing in my ears. For years I had carried this secret. Now it was out, raw, undeniable, irreversible. The truth had been spoken, and nothing in our family would ever be the same. For a moment after I spoke, no one moved. The air felt thick, like the oxygen had been sucked out of the room. Then everything unraveled at once. Jess shot up from her chair, her face twisted with fury. "You don't know what you're talking about, Danny. You've always been jealous of me. Admit it." Her voice shook, but it was more desperation than confidence. Matt stood too, but his movements were slower, heavier, like he was carrying something he couldn't set down. His eyes flicked between me and Jess, searching for a lifeline. "Jess," he said quietly, almost pleading, "tell me it's not true." She didn't answer, not right away. Her silence was louder than her denial. Kay finally moved, pushing her chair back with a scrape against the floor. She didn't cry, she didn't scream. She just stood there, her hands trembling at her sides, her face pale. "All this time," she whispered, "I thought it was me. I thought I wasn't good enough." Her voice cracked on the last word, and I felt something inside me break. "Kay, no," I said quickly, reaching for her, but she shook her head, stepping back. Jess rounded on me, her eyes blazing. "You've ruined everything. Do you even realize what you've done? You're tearing this family apart over nothing." Nothing. My voice was low, controlled, but every syllable cut like glass. "You call Kay's heart nothing? You call the truth nothing? You built your entire engagement on a lie, Jess. That's not love, that's theft." The room was chaos. My mother tried to intervene, begging us to sit down, her voice trembling. My father was silent, his jaw tight, his disappointment filling the space, like thunder waiting to break. Matt pressed his hands to his temples, his face pale. Finally, he stepped back from Jess, his voice hollow. "I need air," he muttered before leaving the table entirely. The slam of the door echoed through the house. Kay turned and walked quietly to her room. She didn't slam the door, she didn't shout. She just disappeared into silence, which somehow felt worse than anything else. Jess stood in the middle of the living room, shaking with rage, her ringed hand clenched into a fist. "You're going to regret this, Danny," she hissed at me, her voice dripping with venom. "You've destroyed us." But as I looked at her, at the sister I had once tried to protect, I realized the truth. I hadn't destroyed anything, I had only pulled the mask off. The destruction had been there all along. The weeks after that dinner felt like walking through the wreckage of a fire. Nothing looked the same, nothing felt the same. Matt moved out of Jess's apartment almost immediately. He didn't leave with anger, more like someone who had woken up from a dream and realized he'd been living in a house built on sand. He texted me once, a short message. "Thank you for telling me. I wish I'd known sooner." Later, he reached out to Kay. I don't know what he said, but I know he apologized. He told her the truth, that he had believed Jess without question, that he'd cut her off thinking she'd deceived him. Kay listened. She didn't lash out. She didn't even raise her voice. She just nodded quietly and said, "It's too late now." And maybe it was. Jess, on the other hand, spiraled. The engagement was called off, her ring tucked away in a drawer she refused to open. She blocked Matt's number, then mine. She stopped showing up to family dinners, stopped answering calls, stopped pretending. Her absence was loud, but not unexpected. Jess had always lived in a world where she needed to win. And now, stripped of victory, she couldn't bear to face anyone. Kay carried on, as she always did, strong, graceful, understated. But I noticed something different in her now. Not bitterness, not anger, just a certain weariness, like she'd learned once and for all that life doesn't always reward kindness. She smiled when she needed to, worked diligently, and never once brought up Jess or Matt again. As for me, I was left with silence, a silence I had once feared, but now understood differently. Because this silence wasn't peace, it wasn't comfort, it was the aftermath of truth, sharp, jagged, impossible to ignore. We were no longer the same family we once were. We couldn't be, but at least the lie was gone. At least Kay knew she wasn't crazy. She hadn't imagined the way Matt once looked at her. She hadn't been unworthy. She hadn't been not enough. Jess had stolen her chance, yes, but at least now Kay finally knew the truth. And sometimes knowing the truth is the only justice we get. People like to believe that truth sets you free, but no one ever talks about the chains it leaves behind. In the end, telling the truth didn't fix anything. It didn't bring Kay and Matt together. It didn't mend the fractures in our family. It didn't make Jess see herself clearly, or apologize, or change. What it did was rip away the illusion we had all been living in. And maybe that's enough. Kay no longer carries the quiet weight of believing she was unworthy. She knows finally that it wasn't her fault. The heartbreak wasn't born from her flaws. It was born from Jess's cruelty. That knowledge may not heal her, but it gives her back her dignity. As for Jess, she isolated herself, consumed by the very hunger that once drove her. Without the lie, she had nothing left to stand on. And me, I walk through the silence differently now. Not as a peacekeeper, not as a coward, but as someone who finally understands that silence can be its own kind of violence. The truth didn't reunite us. It didn't give us back what we lost. But it did something else. It exposed the betrayal for what it was. And sometimes that's the only revenge we're ever granted. This lie shattered my family, but maybe silence would have done the same. What do you think? Did I make the right choice? Share your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear what you would have done.